What happens when Meghan Markle steps onto the set of The View and sparks fly? You won't believe what unfolds when the Duchess faces off against Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin in a clash that's already being called the most explosive episode in the show's history. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this confrontation is one you won't want to miss. Last night, The View aired an episode that had everyone talking. The guest? None other than Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, known for her polarizing presence and unapologetic opinions. The stage was set for a fiery exchange, with Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny ready to grill their guest. From the moment Meghan walked out, the tension was palpable, and what started as a routine interview quickly spiraled into a verbal showdown that left jaws on the floor. The episode began with the usual fanfare. Cheers from the audience, the host's signature banter, and Meghan striding onto the set in a sleek, tailored blazer, her smile polished but guarded. Whoopi, perched at the head of the table, gave her a nod, but her eyes were sharp, sizing Meghan up like a boxer before a match. Joy, never one to hold back, leaned forward with a smirk, her pen tapping the table as if counting down to the first jab. Sunny, cool and calculated, adjusted her glasses, her legal mind already dissecting Meghan's every word. The other two panelists, less vocal but no less opinionated, watched from the sidelines, ready to jump in when the moment called. The opening segment was meant to be light, a discussion about Meghan's latest projects, her life in California, and her pivot from royalty to media mogul. But the hosts had other plans. Whoopi kicked things off, her voice low but pointed. Meghan, you've been in the headlines a lot lately. Some say you're chasing fame. Others say you're just trying to live your truth. Which is it? The question landed like a grenade, and the audience murmured, sensing the edge in her tone. Meghan didn't flinch. She tilted her head, her smile tightening. I'm focused on building something meaningful, she said, her voice smooth but laced. With defiance. I don't chase fame, I create opportunities. There's a difference. The audience clapped, but Joy wasn't having it. She leaned in, her eyes glinting with skepticism. Opportunities? Some would say you're capitalizing on your title while distancing yourself from the royal family. That's a pretty convenient pivot, don't you think? The air grew heavy. Meghan's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. I'm not here to rehash old narratives, she said, her tone clipped. I'm here to talk about what I'm doing now, empowering women, amplifying voices, creating content that matters. Sunny raised an eyebrow, her voice cutting through like a scalpel. But let's be real, Meghan. Your brand thrives on controversy. Every move you make seems calculated to keep you in the spotlight. Is that empowerment or just good PR? The audience gasped, and Meghan's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the table. Sunny, with all due respect, I don't think it's fair to reduce my work to PR. I've spent years building something authentic, and I'm not going to apologize for being visible. The response was measured, but the undercurrent of irritation was clear. Whoopi snorted, folding her arms. Authentic? That's a big word, Meghan. Some might say you're more about headlines than heart. The crowd stirred, a mix of cheers and murmurs rippling through the studio. Meghan's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, her voice steady. I'm not surprised you'd say that, Whoopi. People love to tear down what they don't understand. My work speaks for itself. The jab was subtle, but it hit its mark. Whoopi's eyes flashed, and she leaned forward, her voice rising. Oh, we understand plenty, Meghan. We understand someone who walks away from duty and then cries victim when the world doesn't roll out the red carpet. The audience erupted, some clapping, others gasping. Joy jumped in, her voice sharp. Let's talk about that duty. You left the royal family, fine. But then you go on global stages, spilling tea about them, while still using the Duchess title. You can't have it both ways, Meghan. The accusation hung in the air, and Meghan's composure cracked just enough for the cameras to catch it. A flicker of anger in her eyes. I'm not here to defend my choices to you, Joy, she shot back. I'm here to talk about my work, not to be interrogated about my past. Sunny smirked, sensing blood in the water. But your past is your brand, Meghan. You can't separate the two. You've built a career on being the outsider, the rebel, the one who speaks truth. But is it truth, or is it just your version of it? The audience was eating it up, their reactions a mix of cheers and boos. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line, and she took a slow breath before responding. My truth is my truth, Sunny. I don't need your approval to validate it. The tension was electric, the kind that makes you lean closer to the screen, knowing something bigger is coming. Whoopi wasn't about to let Meghan have the last word. You talk about truth, but let's talk about accountability, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. You've got a lot to say about everyone else, but when it comes to taking responsibility for your own choices, you dodge. That's not truth. That's convenience. The audience roared, and Meghan's face flushed, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The segment was supposed to wrap there, with a commercial break to cool things down, but the hosts weren't done. Joy leaned in again, her tone mocking. You know, Meghan, for someone who claims to be about empowerment, you sure spend a lot of time playing the victim card. Why not own your choices instead of blaming everyone else? The crowd was on edge, sensing the interview was veering into dangerous territory. Meghan's eyes darted between the hosts, her voice low but sharp. I own every choice I've made. Can you say the same, Joy? Or are you just here to twist my words for clicks? The audience gasped, and Whoopi's face hardened. She pointed a finger at Meghan, her voice booming. Don't come on my show and try to flip the script, Meghan. You're not the only one with a voice here. The crowd was buzzing now, the energy chaotic. Meghan didn't back down, her own voice rising to match. I'm not trying to flip anything, Whoopi. I'm just asking for a fair conversation, not a witch hunt. The stage was set for a collision, and the commercial break couldn't come soon enough. As the cameras panned out, Meghan's posture was rigid, her eyes locked on Whoopi, who stared back with equal intensity. The other panelists exchanged glances, knowing they'd struck a nerve, and they weren't about to let it go. What would happen when the show returned? Would Meghan hold her ground, or would the hosts push her to the breaking point? One thing was clear. This was only the beginning of the storm. The commercial break ended, and the cameras zoomed back into the charged atmosphere of the View's set. The audience was restless, their murmurs buzzing like static before a lightning strike. Meghan Markle sat ramrod straight, her hands folded tightly, her gaze fixed somewhere just past Whoopi Goldberg, who leaned back in her chair with a look that could cut glass. Joy Behar's smirk hadn't faded, her fingers drumming the table, as if itching for the next round. Sunny Hostin, ever the strategist, adjusted her notes, her eyes flicking between Meghan and her co-hosts, ready to pounce. The other two panelists, quieter but no less invested, watched with hawk-like focus. The stage was a powder keg, and the fuse was already lit. Whoopi didn't waste a second. Welcome back to The View, she said, her voice deceptively calm, but laced with venom. We're here with Meghan Markle, and let's just say things are getting real. The audience chuckled nervously, sensing the storm about to break. Whoopi turned to Meghan, her eyes narrowing. Before the break, you said you wanted a fair conversation. So let's have it. Why do you think people call you out for playing both sides, royal and rebel? Meghan's lips twitched, a flash of irritation crossing her face before she smoothed it over. Whoopi, I'm not playing any sides, she said, her voice steady but tight. I'm living my life, building my legacy. If people want to twist that into some narrative about me being a hypocrite, that's their problem, not mine. The audience murmured, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. Joy snorted, leaning forward. Your legacy? Meghan, you're selling jam and Netflix specials while still leaning on that Duchess title. That's not a legacy, that's a hustle. The crowd gasped, and Meghan's eyes flashed with barely contained anger. Joy, you're deliberately misrepresenting what I'm doing, she shot back, her voice rising. My work is about impact, philanthropy, storytelling, lifting up others. I don't need to justify that to you or anyone else. Sunny jumped in, her tone sharp and prosecutorial. But you're not answering the question, Meghan. You can't claim to be independent while profiting off the royal brand. That's what people resent. Why not just drop the title and stand on your own? The audience roared, a mix of cheers and boos. Meghan's jaw clenched, and she leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. Sunny, I earned that title through marriage, through service, through sacrifice. I'm not dropping anything because you or anyone else thinks it's convenient for your narrative. The defiance in her words hung heavy, but Whoopi wasn't letting it slide. Sacrifice. She scoffed, her voice booming. You walked away from a family, a country, a duty, and now you're crying sacrifice? Spare me, Meghan. You're not fooling anybody. The crowd erupted, and Meghan's composure cracked, her hands slamming lightly on the table. I'm not crying anything, Whoopi, she snapped. I left a toxic situation to protect my family. You don't get to judge that from your chair. The audience was split, some cheering Meghan's fire, others shouting support for Whoopi. Joy leaned in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Protect your family? Or protect your brand? Because every interview, every podcast, every book feels like a calculated move to keep the drama alive. Meghan's eyes blazed, and she turned to Joy, her voice shaking with controlled rage. You're accusing me of manufacturing drama? Look around, Joy. You're the ones turning this into a circus, twisting my words to fit your agenda. Sunny smirked, unfazed. Agenda? We're just asking questions, Meghan. If you can't handle them, maybe you're not as ready for this platform as you think. The jab landed, and Meghan's face flushed, her breath quickening. I'm more than ready, Sunny, she said, her voice icy. But I'm not interested in playing punching bag for your ratings. The audience was electric, hanging on every word. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice like a blade. Oh, you're ready, all right. Ready to dodge accountability while you parade around like you're some kind of truth. You're a selfish bitch, Meghan, and you've been coasting on that act for too long. The crowd gasped, a stunned silence falling for a split second before erupting into chaos. Cheers, boos, shouts. Meghan froze, her eyes wide with shock at the blunt insult, her hands trembling on the table. Excuse me, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Did you just call me a bitch on national television? Whoopi didn't blink. I said what? I said. She replied, her tone unapologetic. You come here acting like you're above it all, but you're not. You're playing a game, and we're calling it out. The audience was on its feet, the energy frenetic. Meghan's breath hitched, and she leaned forward, her voice shaking but resolute. You don't get to talk to me like that, Whoopi. I came here in good faith, and you're turning this into a personal attack. Joy chuckled darkly. Good. Faith. You came here knowing exactly what you were walking into. Don't act surprised now. Meghan's eyes darted between the hosts, her chest rising and falling rapidly. This isn't a conversation, she said, her voice breaking with fury. This is an ambush. You're not interested in what I have to say. You just want to tear me down. Sunny tilted her head, her voice calm but cutting. If you feel ambushed, maybe it's because you're not used to being challenged. You're used to curating your narrative, Meghan. This is real talk. The audience cheered, but Meghan shook her head, her voice rising. Real talk? This is a lynching, and you know it. The word landed like a bomb, and the studio fell into a stunned hush. Whoopi's face hardened, her voice low and furious. Don't you dare throw that word around, Meghan. You don't get to play that card here. The audience was divided, some shouting in agreement, others murmuring in discomfort. Meghan didn't back down, her eyes locked on Whoopi. I'm calling it what it is, she said, her voice trembling with conviction. You're ganging up on me, twisting my words, insulting me on live TV. That's not a discussion, that's a takedown. Joy rolled her eyes, her voice sharp. Oh, please, Meghan. You're not a victim here. You walked onto this set ready to spar, and now you're crying foul because we're hitting back. Meghan's hands shook, and she pointed a finger at Joy, her voice cracking. I'm not crying anything, Joy. I'm calling out your hypocrisy. You claim to be about fairness, but you're just bullying me for headlines. The audience was a cacophony of reactions, the tension suffocating. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice a growl. You want to talk about bullying? Look at how you've dragged your own family through the mud, Meghan. You don't get to lecture us about fairness. The crowd roared, and Meghan's face paled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't know my story, Whoopi, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what I've been through. Sunny smirked, her tone icy. We know enough, Meghan, and so does the world. The confrontation was at a fever pitch, the hosts unrelenting, Meghan pushed to the edge. The cameras caught every flinch, every tremble, every glare. The audience was glued to the drama, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would dominate headlines. But the breaking point was looming, and the question hung in the air. How much more could Meghan take before she snapped? As the segment teetered on the brink of collapse, The stage was set for an explosion that no one could predict. The studio lights burned hotter as the view set pulsed with raw energy, the audience hanging on the edge of their seats. Meghan Markle's face was a mask of barely contained fury, her hands gripping the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. Whoopi Goldberg stared her down, her own expression a mix of disdain and defiance, while Joy Behar's smirk was practically a weapon, daring Meghan to keep fighting. Sunny Hostin, cool and unrelenting, scribbled something on her notepad, her eyes flicking up to gauge Meghan's next move. The other two panelists, though quieter, leaned forward, their silence as heavy as the words flying across the table. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and the air crackled with the promise of a final, shattering blow. Whoopi broke the tense silence, her voice low and deliberate, each word a dagger. "You say we don't know your story, Meghan, but we know enough. You've made a career out of pointing fingers, but when the spotlight's on you, you crumble. Why should we believe you're anything more than a calculated opportunist?" The audience erupted, a chaotic mix of cheers and gasps, the noise swallowing the set. Meghan's eyes flashed, and she leaned forward, her voice shaking but resolute. "You want to talk about opportunists, Whoopi? Look at this show. You thrive on tearing people down, calling it real talk. You're not journalists, you're vultures." The crowd roared, some clapping for Meghan's audacity, others shouting in defense of the hosts. Joy's laugh was sharp, cutting through the chaos. "Vultures? Oh, that's rich, Meghan. You've been picking at the royal family's carcass for years, and now you're mad we're calling you out? Give me a break." Meghan's face flushed, her voice rising to a near shout. "I'm not mad, Joy. I'm done. Done with you twisting everything I say to fit your narrative. You don't want a conversation, you want a spectacle." Sunny tilted her head, her tone icy and precise. "A spectacle? Meghan, you're the one who's built a brand on drama. Every interview, every project, it's all calculated to keep you relevant. Don't act like you're above this." The audience was a live wire, their reactions a cacophony of support and dissent. Meghan shook her head, her voice trembling with rage. "You're wrong, Sunny. I'm not here for relevance. I'm here for impact. But you wouldn't know the difference, would you? You're too busy playing judge and jury." Whoopi slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Enough with the martyr act, Meghan," she bellowed, her voice shaking the studio. "You come on our show, acting like you're some beacon of truth, but you're just a selfish bitch dodging accountability. You don't get to lecture us when you've left a trail of chaos everywhere you go." The audience exploded, the insult reigniting the frenzy. Meghan's breath caught, her eyes wide with shock and fury. "You're crossing a line, Whoopi," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to call me that and expect me to sit here and take it." The crowd was on its feet, the energy chaotic and suffocating. Joy leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. "Then don't sit here, Meghan. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen." The audience roared, some chanting for Meghan to stay, others egging on the hosts. Meghan's eyes darted between them, her chest heaving as she fought to keep her composure. "You think I'm scared of you?" she shot back, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've faced worse than this, Joy, but I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected." Sunny smirked, her voice calm but cutting. "Disrespected? Meghan, you've disrespected an entire institution, your family, and now you're acting like we're the bad guys for calling it out. That's not how this works." Meghan's hands shook, and she pointed a finger at Sunny, her voice breaking. "You don't know what I've been through, Sunny. You don't know the half of it. But you sit there, smug, acting like you've got me all figured out. You don't." Whoopi's eyes blazed, and she leaned forward, her voice a growl. "We know enough, Meghan. We know you've got a knack for playing the victim while you cash in on the drama. You're not fooling anyone anymore." The audience was a storm of noise, the tension unbearable. Meghan's face paled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but her voice held steady. "You're wrong about me, Whoopi, and I'm not going to stay here and let you lie about who I am." The studio fell into a stunned hush, the weight of her words sinking in. Meghan pushed her chair back, the screech of metal against the floor cutting through the silence. "I came here to talk about my work, my vision," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "But you've made it clear you're not interested in that. You want blood, and I'm not giving it to you." The audience gasped, some shouting, for her to stay, others cheering the host's relentless attack. Whoopi folded her arms, her voice cold. If you can't handle a real conversation, Meghan, then maybe you're not as strong as you think. Meghan stood, her posture rigid. Her eyes locked on Whoopi. I'm stronger than you'll ever know, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. But I don't need to prove that to you. I'm done here. She ripped off her mic, the small device clattering to the table, and turned toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply against the stage. Joy called after her, her voice mocking. Run away, Meghan. That's what you do best. The audience was a whirlwind of reactions, some booing Meghan's exit, others shouting in support. Sunny shook her head, muttering under her breath. Typical. Whoopi leaned back, her expression unreadable but triumphant, as if she'd won a war. The cameras followed Meghan as she stormed off the set, her silhouette disappearing behind the curtains, leaving the hosts and the audience in a stunned, electric silence. The stage was left in chaos, the hosts unmoved, their faces a mix of satisfaction and defiance. The audience buzzed with chatter, already dissecting the explosive confrontation. Whoopi turned to the camera, her voice calm but firm. Well, folks, that's the view for you. Real talk, no filter. We'll be right back. The crowd erupted one final time as the show cut to commercial, the drama of Meghan's exit etched into the minds of everyone watching. The confrontation was over, but its echoes would linger, a testament to a clash that burned too brightly to be forgotten.